Since its beginning, Bennett College students have fought to fulfill the promises of equality set forth in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. One of the amendments that ratified citizenship for all persons born or naturalized in the United States and guaranteed equal protection of the law for all. In the early years, under President Dr. David Dallas Jones, Bennett students refused to ride on segregated buses. They walked downtown instead. In 1938, area theater owners attempted to edit out progressive movie scenes of black characters who were not portrayed in a stereotypical fashion. Bennett College students leveraged the economic power of the African American community by staging a citywide boycott of the downtown theaters to reverse this practice. Then in 1959, in a small meeting room in the student union, Bennett Bells laid out the plan for a sit-in at the Woolworth lunch counter with the blessing of then President Willoughby Blair. This launched a political movement which lasted for several years. As a result, most Greensboro stores were desegregated by the mid-1960s. The students were arrested, they refused bail, and to keep up with their classwork, the president, Dr. Blair, delivered their assignments to jail. The 15th Amendment gave African American men the right to vote. The 19th Amendment gave all women the right to vote. However, many practices were still in place to exclude African American men and women from voting. Bells led a program called Operation Door Knock to inform the community and register citizens to vote during the early 60s. They went into the neighborhood and visited people in their homes. They talked with them about the importance of their vote to democracy and citizenship. That commitment to voting rights continues today. Bennett Bells are voting bells, and they demand equality and fight for social justice. It is in that spirit we all meet today to continue this important work.
Happy Constitution Day, Carmesha.
Happy Constitution Day, Jaisha.
This is a special Constitution Day program brought to you by Bel Air Radio. I'm your host, Jaisha Smalls.
And I'm your girl, Misha B. Jaisha, did you get those presents I sent to you for Constitution Day?
Oh, yeah, that was that box on my doorstep. Oh, okay. Yeah, I got them. Girl.
You got it? What did you get me?
Well, I forgot to get you something, but I do have my old time machine gadget. Remember from the previous episode?
That didn't go so well for me last time. Are you going to come along with me?
Yes, I'm going to come. It works, but we're going to go. And guess what? We're going to witness the signing of, the Constitution.
Wow, that's going to be so much fun.
I know. But before we go, we have some great interviews coming up.
I interviewed Dr. Will Harris, who is the principal scholar at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, and he's also a constitutional scholar.
I interviewed historian Martha Jones, and also I interviewed Autumn Lee, who is a voting activist.
We hope you enjoyed the show, and next time that you will see us together, we will be in Philadelphia at the signing of the U.S. Constitution. Stay tuned.
Welcome to our 2020 Constitution Day observation. Let us bow together in prayer. Gracious God, you have established government to serve you and your people. You give government limited power to be exercised under your guidance. The actions of your servants are designed for justice and administered for the common good of humanity. In the crafting of the Constitution, selected persons were considered worthy of rights. We thank you, God, for opening doors for all humanity to be recognized as whole persons, created in your image and likeness Almighty God. This nation's founders drew a frame for governance, but you, Lord, have the ultimate power to fill its canvas by your sovereign grace. We pray for all women and men having influence over us in any way. Please pour out your Spirit and make your word and your will known to them. Cause them to be women and men of integrity and obedient concerning us. Let wisdom enter their hearts, and let knowledge be pleasant to them. Let discretion preserve them, and understanding keep them to deliver them from the way of evil and evil people. Make their hearts and ears sensitive, attentive to godly counsel, doing what is right in your sight. Inform or remind them. For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but many advisors make victory sure. Inform or remind our leaders. A house divided against itself cannot stand, or a family splintered by feuding will fall apart. Dear God, please heal our land of destructive division. We seek the peace and well-being of our cities and our nation. Lord, we pray for our communities, because if they flourish, we too will flourish. Let the upright dwell in government. Bring to light what is hidden in darkness and expose the secret aims of the hearts. Let our nation remember where we have fallen away. Lord, please raise up a standard in our nation. Cause the rains of your Spirit to flood this land and revive your work in the midst of us. Let your glory be revealed, dear God. We trust you. Amen.
I am here with Dr. Will Harris, who is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and the principal scholar at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. How are you doing today, Dr. Will?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you for asking.
That's good. So I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to be a scholar on Constitution Day?
Well, sometimes it means a lot of things. I'm thinking about what it means to have a day that's focused on your scholarship, the kind of thing that you spend your time with. And of course, September the 17th, which the Congress has decided to call Constitution Day, was the day that the members of the Constitutional Convention in 1787 finalized the proposal for the United States Constitution. And signed it, most of them who did sign it at that time. It was at that point only a proposal, and it had to be ratified by the conventions in all of the states, or at least 9 of them, before it would be considered to be the Constitution. Before that, it was just something you or I or a group of thoughtful people might come together. We write something that we think is very appropriate and smart, and we ask people to say yes to it. Fortunately, the country did say yes.
So do you give like presents to people? Like it's Christmas? Is this like a Christmas holiday for you?
Great question. If we take the Constitution seriously, the Constitution is our present. It is something that was not so much given to us as that we have to make real. So the source of the Constitution is ourselves. And that means we have to deeply think about what it means, why we have it, what we can use it for, and whether or not we need to change it from time to time. So it's a workable thing, and that's the gift, and it's a gift we give to ourselves. If you note, the Constitution is written in the present tense. We do ordain and establish. A document that is essentially permanent or long-standing, that is written in the present tense, essentially is spoken every time you read it. And so the present tense is something very powerful about it, not always noticed by people. You notice that if you take a good look at it, to say that it's in the present tense, we do ordain, something is or will be, is a continuing promise to ourselves, and not something that we got from the past.
Could you take me back to a young Dr. Will and explain what sparked his interest in history and or like the Constitution?
What sparked my interest then and sparks my interest now is words, all right? We build worlds with words, or we can. A novelist builds a world with words. If you enter into the story and you identify with the character or you follow out a narrative, you exist within that space of words for the time that you're reading. And that's just a kind of metaphor. A constitution is a different sort of words because once we say them and once we say that we want to live by them, those words then become the key to our existence. And that's really important. And what I understood long ago is that if you can say the words in the right way, and if you can get people to agree on the fact that you want to live by those words, then you can make a world and you can also make a world different. And so if you care about change, if you care about real change, not the kind of change that's good for a day or two or a year, or that people agree to and then forget, if you care about changing the world, you need to understand how to use constitutional words, because those constitutional words are the ones you want to write, you want to say, you want to live by, in order to make the world in the image of your thoughts, your intelligence, your hopes, your purposes. So it's worth it not just to remember what happened maybe in 1787, but what could happen today. And I want to make it very clear, I'm not a historian, all right? I'm a constitutional theorist. So my concerns are not about the past. My concerns about now, they're concerns about then, in the past, and in the future. So we care about the fact that this keeps us alive as a country. And if it's in jeopardy at some point in our history, like now, then it jeopardizes the country as a whole.
What is it about the Constitution that makes it a good system to run our government?
Well, I have to tell you in response to your very honest question there that it's clearly not being a good system for our government right now. Now, the question I always tell people is, well, if you don't think it's working, then make sure you try to make it work first before you criticize it rather than us for not using it correctly or for not understanding, for not reading it, for not talking about it, for not holding our government to the principles and the language of the Constitution. If we don't do that, then it's our fault. We're the ones who failed the Constitution and not the Constitution that has failed us. But I do wonder right now if certain qualities of the Constitution have not run their course and need to be reconsidered. Now, one thing that we've already done, and that's the thing that we describe on another Constitution Day, which we've already discussed at the museum back in July. In 1868, we fundamentally amended the Constitution with the 14th Amendment and the citizenship clauses, which changes the whole thing if we take it seriously.
So, Dr. Will, some of the founding fathers who did help write the Constitution didn't necessarily practice what they preach. For example, some of them were slave owners, they didn't practice equality. So how do we depend on the Constitution?
Good question, and a lot of people have worried about it. Of course, we also have to realize that one of the qualities of human nature is that nearly all of us, probably all of us, do not practice what we preach. And when we preach something, usually it's because we may believe it, but we can't match the performance to our words. And that puts us in a position where people can criticize us. So they can tell us, you're not performing the sort of thing you promised. And when that happens, we have a way of telling someone, you're not in the right. And that's not because another one of us has a different point of view, but because you yourself have that point of view and you've stated it and you're not practicing it. And that's essentially the state of this country. It has made promises. It has made statements that the country regards as statements of truth or validity or important foundational integrity. And then they have violated those statements and they have violated those promises. They have not performed their commitments. And the way we do it in this country, and need always, is to say, look, you're out of sync with your words. You're out of sync with your promises. Get right with it. So most of us would say, well, I would certainly rather change my behavior to fit my promises than to have to renege on my promises that I created as a foundation for everything that we live by. And so one of the ways to handle the founders and the fact that they did not perform according to what they believed or stated they believed, they violated their own promises, is to say, we don't rely on their actions. Those are not the precedent for our values. We rely on their promises, we rely on their words, and it is up to us to make those promises true, even though they didn't. So those promises are worth our putting our investment of time and energy and effort to try to make true as a way of life in this country. Just because they drafted the language, they are not the source of the language. The language of the Constitution comes from the ratification process, and that's all the people who participated in the conventions in the 13 states. And there were a lot more participants or people who could participate than we usually give them credit for. There was very high literacy at the time, and I mean deeply into the population. It was possible in 3 or 4 states for Black people to vote at that stage in our history. In a few states, even women could participate. So we tell the story about the fact that, oh no, it's only white male landowners. Well, it was mostly, and they were the ones who controlled, that's for sure. But they were not the only ones who could participate. So the source of the promises in our Constitution come from the people who ratified, and they come as well from the people today who can speak of that Constitution in the present tense and say that they would like to live by it. So if we can live by the words, if they're worth living by in the first place, then they are valuable to us.
So, Dr. Harris, if you could talk to any one of the founding fathers, what would you say, and who would it be, and why?
It would be James Madison. It would have to be, because he's the key person. And I have to tell you that for 7 years, I lived at Montpelier, which is his house. And at night, when everybody was gone and only I was left on this 4 square mile piece of property, except maybe 1 or 2 other people farther away from me, I would walk around his house. I would walk up to the graveyard where he's buried. I would sort of hang out with him, sit on his front portico, look out at the world, think about what it was like to be living in that place and coming up with his ideas for the Constitution, which he did act as the source for the major contours of that Constitution in 1787.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Will. Could you please leave us with your information for people who want to contact you, who may want to learn more about the Constitution or some of your work?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's probably worth knowing that at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum, we're doing a series of presentations. We think of 3 foundings of the Constitution. I'll be doing a presentation on the second founding, on the Madisonian, Hamiltonian founding that we've been talking about today, the one we celebrate on Constitution Day on September 17th. That'll be at 2 o'clock on Zoom. And if you're interested in it, and then again the next day at 12:30, you can check with our scheduling to get a Zoom link at our website, which is sitinmovement.org. You can get a Zoom link there. Other than that, we're here at the International Civil Rights Center and Museum. You can check us out here. We'd love to connect with you, especially people from Bennett College, because of course, you'll have a great heritage as far as the sit-in movement is concerned. You bet.
Thank you again, Dr. Will, for your time. I really appreciate it.
So joining me today, she is a professor at Johns Hopkins University, a historian, a writer, and for the Bennett community, she is the granddaughter of Bennett's first president, David Dallas Jones. She is Martha Jones. Ms. Martha Jones, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So just to start off the conversation, for the Bennett community, I had to know, what was Bennett like being on campus as a little girl?
It was quiet, and we were small kids, and we had the run of the campus. And so we don't tell anybody. We played in the chapel. We played in the infirmary. We played in the dining hall. My grandmother's house is still on the Bennett campus at 716 Goral Street. And so as a kid, I sat on that front porch and I watched as the bells did their thing all day, and felt like I was with the big kids. There was a man in those days who cut the lawn and worked with a transistor radio. So I had the music as he was working around the grounds. And Bennett was a safe place. It was a thoughtful place. The conversations were always about the real world, what was happening around us. I was raised in the civil rights generation. I was young, but Bennett was a place where we understood those things. We talked about those things. We debated those things. And we never forgot the bigger world that we were a part of, even as we were in this very safe place in Greensboro.
Yes, that's awesome. That's still the same today. So that's good. Now, your newest book, Vanguard, I see it in the background.
Yeah. It's over here.
Yeah, I see it. So what was the influence on that? And you could tell listeners and our viewers what's it about.
Sure. So Vanguard, How Black Women Broke Barriers, Won the Vote, and Insisted on Equality for All, looks at 200 years of Black women's political history with an emphasis on voting rights, and in a sense asks, how did we get here? How did we arrive at a moment in the 21st century when 6 Black women were on Joe Biden's shortlist for the vice presidency, where 120 plus Black women are running for Congress, where in a state like Alabama, Black women can turn the outcome of a special election to the US Senate like they did in 2017. I knew that the answer to that story was not in a narrative that focused on Susan B. Anthony or Elizabeth Cady Stanton, that Black women had their own sheroes, they had their own political history. And I am very fortunate to be part of an organization called the Association of Black Women's Historians, part of 3 going on 4 generations of Black women's historians who have been at work on these questions. And I took my chance to try and stand on the shoulders of that work and offer us a story that would really help us discern better, yes, as Black women, but really as a country, who someone like Senator Harris is, where she comes from.
I heard in the NPR interview that you did about the 19th Amendment, and you said racism runs through the debates over women's suffrage. Could you elaborate on that and let me know what that means?
Sure. If we turn the clock back to the 1860s, a very long time ago, when we have the founding of the first women's suffrage associations in the United States, already we can demonstrate how some women in those movements not only themselves espoused racist ideas, they believed in educated suffrage, which meant the vote for white women before any Black person would get the vote, man or woman. And in order to further their cause, there were leaders within that movement who were willing to be political bedfellows with white supremacists if it might win women the vote. And this is an important, though regrettable, thread in the movement for women's suffrage. By the time we get to the 20th century, it is an open secret that Black women suffragists are going to be relegated to the sidelines to win the support of white women suffragists who will not work in the movement alongside Black women. And that by the time the amendment is being debated in Congress and then in the individual states, it is openly confessed that the 19th Amendment will succeed because nothing in it will interfere with the right of the individual states, particularly those in the South, to use literacy tests and poll taxes and grandfather clauses and more to disenfranchise Black women. There's nothing in the 19th Amendment, intentionally so, consciously so, there's nothing in the 19th Amendment that will protect Black women from what the states plan to do, which is to disenfranchise them just as they have already disenfranchised Black men.
So what has to happen when the amendment is placed in the US Constitution for it to become reality for everyone?
The 19th Amendment is a great example. Words in the Constitution that say no longer may states use sex as a criteria for voting rights, but they stay words on the paper in the 19th Amendment's example until Black women really test those words. How do they test them? In the fall of 1920, after the amendment has become part of the Constitution, Black women have to organize. They set up suffrage schools. They teach one another. How do you register? How do you pay a poll tax? What's a literacy test? So there is education that has to happen, right? And then there has to be organizing. You've got to turn out at the registrar, and you've got to do it in a way that's safe. So you're going to organize together, come out as a group, safety in numbers to avoid violence and intimidation. This is the way that Black women begin to breathe meaning into the 19th Amendment, or at least to test the meaning. So think about how long a story that is, from 1870 and the 15th Amendment till 1965, almost 100 years, right, before we get the kind of teeth, right, that permit Black Americans to insist on the spirit of the 15th Amendment.
For the younger women at Bennett and younger women all over, talk about what does voting mean to you and how important voting is, and where does voting take us years from now?
So one of the things I did when writing Vanguard was finally look at my own family history of voting rights. I didn't know anything about it.
Oh,
and
wow.
What I learned reminded me how hard the people, my forebears, struggled to win the vote. David Dallas Jones's father, Sidney Jones, lived in Greensboro in the 1870s. David Jones was raised in Greensboro, born and raised in Greensboro. His father, Sidney Jones, was a barber, but he was also a Republican Party activist. And I was able to find in the records of the Greensboro Historical Museum the flyer that circulated in Greensboro probably around 1890, telling white Democrat officials to keep an eye out for Sidney Dallas Jones, David Jones's father, and to make sure he didn't vote, along with the names of 400 other Black men living in Greensboro and in Guilford County. So when I learned that story, that's my great-grandfather who was publicly intimidated and threatened because he was a party activist, because he was getting out the Black vote and trying to exert control in Greensboro and in North Carolina. Well, that told me something about what I have inherited, what we all have inherited, right? Mm-hmm. Because his story is not just my story, it's all of our stories. Susie Jones's mother, Fannie Williams, was in St. Louis, Missouri in 1920. She was a suffragist, and she organized Black women in a suffrage school in 1920 at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA, teaching all Black women in St. Louis how to register, how to get to the polls, how to cast their ballots. So these are the histories of how we get here. And I think learning those histories just made me all the more committed to being educated myself, to being prepared myself, to share what I know in my community here in Baltimore about what we need to do to cast our ballots, and to use that power, not because it's the only power we have, but it's one piece of the puzzle when it comes to political power for Black Americans and for all Americans. But learning those histories really inspired me to not sleep in on election day or send back my ballot too late or forget to sign the envelope, all those things that can happen around election day. This is not the year to do that. This is the year to honor the sacrifices and the risk and the courage of the folks who came before us, and to do our part on election day.
Thank you so much for joining me, Miss Martha Jones. I've heard that we'll be seeing you again on Founders Day. So
Yeah.
we're excited for that. Thank you so much for joining me. It was definitely a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, and I very much look forward to being back with you all for Founders Day. It's one of my favorite days of the year. So I look forward to seeing all of you then. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to Bennett College and to Constitution Day. Although the authors did not write the Constitution to include people like me, it was meant to guarantee equal rights and justice for all of us. It is important that we as African Americans and Americans in general honor that writing and know that all people are created equal. African Americans are created equal, and we have the right to vote, to be treated justly, and to walk humbly with our God.
So right now I'm here with Autumn, who is the campus coordinator of youcanvote.org. So Autumn, tell me about your position.
Hi, so I'm the campus coordinator, like you said, and basically I'm the campus coordinator for the Triad region in Guilford County. We have other campus coordinators that reside in other counties across the state, but I'm here in the Triad, and I work with the plethora of colleges and universities that we have here in Guilford County.
So what piqued your interest in voting?
Yeah, so I am really big on human rights. And then while I was at UNCG, my other major actually is African diaspora studies. So I took a lot of classes like Black Lives Matter classes and history of race, where we learned about, how certain state organizations and how voting plays into certain aspects of civil rights. And from there, I just realized how integral voting was to civil rights and for communities. And I really wanted to be able to create and help people get empowered to vote, because I personally feel that voting is one of those like strong foundations to helping provide like equitable access and resources in your community, and to help shape how your like local and state government looks to reflect your communities. Sorry, that's my cat.
The cat loves voting too. Yes, we're here for voting. So you mentioned the Black Lives Matter classes, and I've never heard of like Black Lives Matter class. So tell us like your experience taking that class. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so the class was great. It was definitely focused on reading a lot of materials, specifically materials like Zora Neale Hurston and Black women writers, really just talking about nonfiction and fictional like aspects of race and things like that. It was a really great class. I loved it. The professor's name was Tara Green, and I think she's still at UNCG. But I thought it was interesting too that it was actually an entire course centered around the Black Lives Matter movement, and just about like all Black lives, so like transgender lives and things like that, LGBTQ Black lives. So it was a really great class.
So when you register people to vote, are they like with one party or the other?
Those are questions that we don't ask because we are nonpartisan. And on the registration form, you can put down what party you're affiliated with, but most people either don't fill it out or put unaffiliated.
Okay. So as a voting activist, tell us about like your experiences, like things that you have witnessed, or the hardest part of being a voting activist.
I would say the hardest part is definitely misinformation and trying to correct misinformation.
Mm,
I know majority of us are on Twitter and stuff like that, and
mhm.
we know how sure of things people tend to be. So I think just every time I get online, just seeing like wrong information and like getting nervous that like, oh my gosh, like this is reaching like thousands of people or retweeting it, liking it. How do I like rectify the situation? Because it seems like something that's really detrimental to like these people who are seeing it, you know?
So like give us some examples of like the things on Twitter, because Twitter this year is
Been crazy.
crazy. It's been crazy. So like what were some of the things that you see?
Yeah, there was this one interaction I had on Twitter where in my Twitter bio, I put tweets of my own just like to avoid, any fallback. But there was this one woman who was saying how absentee ballot and mail-in voting are two different things, and they're not. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she was trying to tell people that mail-in ballots were coming to your houses, and she had gotten one under someone else's name. They're like sent out under dogs' names just to get people to like fraudulently vote, and that's
Uh-huh.
just not true. And she was like instructing people to request absentee ballots but not mail-in ballots, and I was trying to tell her these are the same things. Yeah, like don't
Yeah.
scare voters away. It's things like this that
Yeah.
really scares people from the process. So that was one stark example that I had in my mind that I was just like, oh no, like we can't be putting out that kind of information.
Yeah. Because see, I was gonna ask because, since the 2020 election is coming up, and like it was like a lot of talk and concerns about voting by mail and voter fraud. So like, what's your opinion on that about voter fraud?
Voter fraud is very, very rare and very low. And
Mhm.
actually, the North Carolina Board of Elections has safeguards in place to prevent that. So if you do request an absentee ballot and you're like, never mind, I want to go vote in person, they have like barcodes on the ballot. So like once you use one ballot, the other one is like null and void at that point. So it prevents voting twice, voting under people's names. You have to register and you have to make sure all of the information is correct. And it is actually a felony to fill out registration forms or things on other
Mhm.
people's behalf. So it's really not as easy as people make it seem, and it's not common.
So we're in the era of technology, increasing with Face ID and all sorts with your phone that you can do, all sorts of features. So why do you think that like voting isn't moving into that direction of technology?
Yeah, I think that we are starting to see it a little bit. So, there is like full online registration now, which is something that the Board of Elections just rolled out, due to COVID. So, if you have your North Carolina's driver's license or ID, you can fully register to vote online. You Can Vote has a process where even if you don't have those materials, you can start the voting registration process online. But in terms of like using Face ID, voting like via your phone and online, um, I'm personally not exactly sure why, but I think that there's just a lot of pushback against technology getting into voting. I think that people have kind of a fear of technology in terms of like hacking and
Hmm.
fraudulent votes, like we had mentioned earlier, even though I personally don't think that would be the case, but I think that people have a fear of technology getting into a system like that is as old as voting for America. So that's my opinion, but I think maybe as we see like our generation growing up and getting, more into these processes, that maybe we can steer things more technologically in an advanced way.
So overall, since the whole pandemic of COVID-19, tell us like the obstacles of still running, the organization and getting everyone involved when it comes to voting. How hard has it been?
Yeah, I would say that honestly, right when the pandemic hit, our founder, Kate, she hit the ground running. She came up with all these ideas on how to keep things going. And I was like shocked at how quick her response was. Like it was literally immediate. And they started creating a whole bunch of just virtual and online events, really taking advantage of the Zoom platform and things like that. So like I said, we have like twice weekly voter empowerment trainings. We have monthly webinars catered to different parts of the community, like faith community, campus community, things like that. And of course, like rolling out the online voter registration process with the Board of Elections. You can do that through our website. So they've really made it way easier to do this virtually. And then in terms of volunteering to help, do voter registration in the community, the phone banking events and the text banking where we reach out to people and, ask them if they're registered to vote, help them register to vote while on the phone or through text. Those have been some ways that we've really adapted to this process.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So overall, tell us your future plans when it comes to being a voting activist and your political future in general.
Yeah, so not sure of my future plans. We all know that this is a huge, huge, huge election year. So there's a lot to do this year. And, once November 3rd comes, it's going to be kind of like a drop off until we have our next midterm elections. So, there are elections every year. There will be elections in 2021 that are important to educate voters about. But I'm not sure how I see that going in the terms of staying a voter activist. I do know that I have tried to stay within realms of helping my community, the Muslim community in Guilford County, helping educate, people on the voting efforts. But I'm definitely interested in all aspects of civil rights and working with human rights. So who knows where I'll go.
That's awesome. Okay, so you leave us with your social media. How can people connect and follow you, and also talk about the organization and their information as well?
Yeah, so for You Can Vote, you can always check out youcanvote.org. Go through our website. We have so many materials. We have a student section. You can go to youcanvote.org/register to register to vote online. All of You Can Vote's social medias are at You Can Vote NC. So that's Twitter, Insta, Facebook, all of that. My email for You Can Vote is autumn, AUTUMN, at youcanvote.org. And then my personal social media is Abeya, ABAEYA. So that's me on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Autumn.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here.
September 22nd. That is the day that you all are going to want to mark on your calendar because what? It is Giving Day at Bennett College. And I know that you are all ready to invest in all of the people, possibilities, and programs that we have coming up in this year. We are so delighted for investments that so many of you have made in the past, and we're going to give you 24 hours to show off a little bit more. So please join us on September 22nd, 2020 for Giving Day for Bennett College. We thank you, we appreciate you, and we look forward to giving you an update on what happens next.
Ooh, Carmesha got me some nice things. Oh, a feather pen. I'll do my homework with that. Oh, one of those gray powdered wigs. Oh, I'm wearing that on Halloween. Okay, what's this?
Hello.
A James Madison bobblehead.
Hello.
She got me some nice stuff. Ooh.
Hello, Jaisha.
Oh, hey,
Where are you?
Carmesha.
Hang out. Where you at? Where are you?
I lost track of time. You got me some good gifts, girl. But
This you promised you were coming with me. What happened?
Carmesha, you got me some good gifts here. Okay, I forgot. I'm sorry, but you're there, so just give us, the special report at the Constitution.
Jaisha. I mean, everyone seems to be excited about the signing of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hot in here. I don't have any reception on my phone. I can't access any of my social media. And there are no Black people. I need to come back to 2020 right now. Right now.
Right now.
Right now. Please. Send me back now.
Okay, I'm working on it. Just hold still, okay? Just hold still.
Hurry up. I'm scared.
Thanks for joining us for this special Constitution Day program. We hope you learned a lot and that you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on the next holiday. And now, gotta get Carmesha.
Peace.